This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Well, it's been anticipated for quite some time, and after we signed off our most recent episode, Alberta's government tabled legislation that will invoke the notwithstanding clause again on 3 bills. This is the second time it's happened this legislative session. Remember, the first was to get Alberta's teachers back in the classroom. Now the Alberta government says it will not, says it cannot wait for the courts to settle, to reach a decision on 3 bills impacting LGBTQ2S+ Albertans, in particular trans youth. Today we'll take on the story with 2 expert voices, plus we'll look to our Real Talk live chat for your position on this. It again has Alberta in the national headlines as its government goes with what is described as the nuclear option, an option that notwithstanding clause within the charter that gives governments the ability to impose legislation for a limited time for a 5-year period, which can be renewed, by the way, in scenarios where legislators disagree with the courts. Now, critics are calling this against the spirit of the notwithstanding clause, saying that the courts have not yet ruled, saying that this is an inappropriate use of the notwithstanding clause. You'll hear from Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith in just a moment as well, her justification for this. Plus, on the heels of our conversation with Max Fawcett, lead columnist at Canada's National Observer, about the possibility of a new pipeline out of Alberta to Canada's west coast through British Columbia. The Globe and Mail is reporting that Alberta and Ottawa are close to an energy accord that would, or that could, include a new pipeline. Arno Kopecky is an energy and federal political journalist. You've likely read his work in the Narwhal. Arno's also going to be joining us to talk about his book, The Oil Man and the Sea. He participated in a mission. He sailed the route of the proposed Northern Gateway pipeline, and Arno will be reporting to us on the back nine of this episode exactly what he found. All of that to come. First, we want to let you know that this episode of Real Talk is happening with the presenting sponsorship of our friends at Hansen Distillery. They've got a brand new mint chocolate liqueur out just in time for the holidays. This is the mint chocolate cream liqueur that I'm holding in my hand. Smooth, cool, and pure holiday indulgence. Think peppermint patty, but with horsepower. We're showing you the website right now, hansendistillery.com, where you can check out their oat milk, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free cream liqueur. Just in time for the holidays, they've also got their gingerbread cookie cream liqueur, kind of like Grandma's cookie jar, if Grandma spiked it. Rich, cozy, and dangerously sippable. And for the whiskey lovers in your life, if you're looking to stuff some stockings this holiday season, the legend returns. Their Northern Eyes 5-year whiskey is back at Hansen. That is bold, oaky, prairie-born, and aged to perfection. It sold out last year. It'll sell out again this year, too. So whether you're sipping something sweet, shaking up festive cocktails, or gifting a bottle that actually gets remembered, Hansen Distillery has your winter spirits covered. You can find them at 174th Street, 111th Ave in Alberta's capital city. You'll find them in liquor stores across Alberta and at hansendistillery.com. Proudly local, always original, made right here. Today we're wading into a conversation that is no doubt emotional, complex, and deeply personal for many Albertans. As mentioned, Danielle Smith's provincial government has introduced Bill 9. This is a piece of legislation that uses the notwithstanding clause to protect 3 laws dealing specifically with transgender youth. These laws impact healthcare, school life, and youth participation in sports. 3 areas, of course, that shape a young person's identity, their friendships, and no doubt their sense of safety in the world. For supporters of this government strategy, this is about ensuring that parents are involved in major decisions. For critics, it's about preserving space for children to grow without pressure. And for many, especially in the LGBTQ2S+ community, this feels like a moment of real vulnerability. You have no doubt seen posts on your social media platforms from folks impacted by this in your life. This is a moment where people are saying that rights and protections that they rely on are slipping away. So what we know for sure is this: there are young people paying attention today who are scared. There are parents who don't know what to believe. There are teachers and coaches, no doubt, wondering how to support the kids in front of them. And there are doctors, we'll hear from the Alberta Medical Association, who want to provide care without interference. They don't want to be caught up in political tides, you might say. So the government says, by way of the Premier, that it's using the notwithstanding clause to create clarity and stability. The government wants to avoid years of legal battles that could leave families in limbo. Critics are worried about the precedent that this sets and the impact on trans youth in particular, who are already at higher risk of isolation, depression, and self-harm. It's safe to say these aren't abstract issues. These are real kids, real families, and real lives. And that's why we're talking about it today on Real Talk. Before we introduce our panel, we want to get to what Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith said to journalists, said to Albertans on the heels of Bill 9 being introduced. Here's the Premier.
We have a responsibility to provide clarity, a responsibility to protect all children and youth, and a responsibility to give parents, not institutions or courts, the primary role in life-changing decisions about their children. This government does not turn to the notwithstanding clause unless the stakes warrant it. And in this case, the stakes could not be higher. This legislation is not about denying care. We cannot and will not take the risk of a child undergoing medical, hormonal, or surgical interventions that could permanently limit or eliminate the choices they may want to make as an adult. We want every young Albertan to receive the mental health supports, the compassion, and the guidance that they need at home, at school, and in their communities. Before I wrap up, I do want to speak directly to young Albertans who are navigating what their identity means through the already difficult process of growing up. You deserve dignity, understanding, and support. You belong in Alberta. We firmly believe that. We also believe it's our duty to protect you. This legislation is about your future, so when the time comes, you have every opportunity to make the adult decisions that are rightfully yours, and yours alone.
And yours alone. That from Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith. Our live chat powered by Park Power already humming here. Erica trying to set the tone out of the gates. Erica says, I really hope people remain civil in the Real Talk live chat today. I really hope that we can respect each other's opinions, even if they are drastically different. And Erica, I'm certain that they will be. She says, I have my doubts. We'll see. Tracy's wondering, where are all the truckers honking about government overreach? Others are wondering about the implications of the notwithstanding clause. Denise says, if Smith doesn't want to spend any of this oil and gas money on healthcare, then just say so. Let the feds run the system. How long until this government invokes the notwithstanding clause to fight the Canada Health Act? We talked about that briefly yesterday with Max, the hybrid public-private provision system. Family doctors involved in that we touched on in yesterday's show. D.W. Dorn says Smith wants parents to have more control over their kids, but she's taking the parents' rights to support their own children away should they see fit. More rules equals fewer freedoms. Boomshanker X says, personally, as a parent, I'm not a big fan of the idea that the government has any say on how I raise my kids. Gora Mutt says, stripping rights. This is the Premier acting out because she couldn't. I'm not going to read the rest of that comment. I rolled into that one cold. Funny, but inappropriate for the conversation. Dr. Glynnis Lieb is a social psychologist, has served as executive director of the Firefly Institute for Sexual and Gender Diversity over the past 7 years. Anna Murphy was a senior staffer for former Alberta Premier Rachel Notley. Anna's been named to Avenue Magazine's Top 40 Under 40, a recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal, the King Charles III Coronation Medal, and the Calgary Stampede Western Trailblazer Award for her advocacy on behalf of 2S LGBTQIA+ individuals. To the both of you, welcome. Dr. Lieb, let me ask you about this. I mean, it was rumored that this action was a long time coming, that the notwithstanding clause would be invoked here. When it actually was, what was your first thought?
I wasn't. Nobody was surprised. We knew exactly what was coming, and we've known for some time. The pretense of conversation and consideration was just that. So, but it's I think a feeling for I think I speak for many people when I say it's just a feeling of, I think, a bit dejection and frustration, because there's absolutely no problem here that this is addressing. It's creating problems.
Anna, your first thought?
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see a province that I love invoke the notwithstanding clause in a way to suspend the charter rights of our neighbors who are transgender and gender diverse, particularly those who are youth. And today we're waking up trying to navigate the very real consequences that this will have on the lives of our friends, neighbors, classmates, teammates. And it is heartbreaking to see that this is the legacy being created for Alberta by Danielle Smith and this government.
In our live chat, Greg says, praise be to the UCP government for protecting our children and our country. Tony says, how does the life of a trans person affect anybody else's everyday life? It has no impact on us as all. Glynnis, what do you think is behind the focus on gender diverse youth?
The focus on gender diverse youth is targeted. It was no accident. We know this was, we're coming at this in a time where, we have housing crisis, we have healthcare crisis, we have inflation we're talking about people who can't afford the basic necessities of life on two incomes. We have a government who's trying to starve out our public healthcare and our public schools to make way for privatization and profit. And people are struggling and they need someone to blame. And unfortunately for our community, it's a community that has made, great gains and is in the public eye. And there's still some lack of understanding and uncertainties. And it's an easy group of people to point people at and distract them by. And we saw that with the initial attack on drag queen storytime, as if that was the biggest problem that our province had to deal with. So this is a targeted approach to distract people from the real problem.
So Bill 9 locks in three things, essentially. First, it restricts access to gender-affirming health care. It means no puberty blockers or hormone therapy for any Albertan under the age of 16. Secondly, it mandates parental notification or consent for students under 16 who want to change their name or pronouns at school. And third, it bans trans girls from participating in female amateur sports categories across Alberta. Anna, you described this as the government legislating against your existence. Would you be willing to share with this audience your personal perspective, what you mean by that?
Well, Ryan, we have to be unequivocal. The mental health risks to transgender and gender diverse Albertans, especially youth, are already high. We know from statistics that the suicidality, whether that is ideation or attempts by those within this community, are already 51% or higher. And so when you have a premier of any government use their podium, use their power to say to someone that your existence is wrong, that who you are is a problem, that is absolutely going to cause people to look to themselves and ask them, do I belong here? And so Danielle Smith is gambling with the lives of vulnerable youth, full stop. And it's not it's not to make them more safe. It's not to, the soft voice that we get of, we love everybody, because that is not the reality. She is demonizing a small group of our citizens in a way to score cheap political points. These are youth who are now facing the real possibility of being forcibly outed at their schools, not to mention the previous government under Premier Jason Kenney, who weakened gay-straight alliances, groups that these folks could otherwise turn to for support, either no longer existing or being unable to get started. Teachers are being placed in impossible moral positions because they want to do what is best by their students. And so it's going to push transgender and gender diverse youth, especially, further to the margins of marginalization. And there are some who heartbreakingly may not survive the consequences. And this is a fundamental break with the actual legacy of Alberta, which is one of being a champion for human rights.
I want to reference Tyler Dawson, who's the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, quoting Danielle Smith just a short time ago in June, earlier this year, 2025, who said on this file, quote, "We want to battle this out. And the way that you do that is you go to the higher levels of court. If we were to impose the notwithstanding clause, everything would stop. We actually think that we've got a very solid case." That was Alberta's premier in June of this year. In our live chat, MetaModern Sound says, isn't invoking the notwithstanding clause kind of an admission that the government knows that it's violating your rights? It's not what the premier's saying, Glynnis. She's saying that they don't want this tied up in the courts for many, many years. She says that this is something that needs to be dealt with right now. Your perspective on invoking the notwithstanding clause?
The comment that this is about caring for people and not wanting to tie this up for many years, who is this caring for? How does it help trans and gender diverse youth to put a full stop on any ability to fight back? How does that help? How does that make their life more simple? And that it doesn't. This is about knowing that this is not going to hold up, is exactly as many experts have been saying, and just it's an absolute utter abuse of power. Back 30 years ago, when Delwyn Vreen's case was being taken to the Supreme Court, we know there was tremendous pressure on the Alberta government then to invoke the notwithstanding clause. And 30 years ago, the government then decided that that was a massive overstep and they couldn't do it. And here we are 30 years later, and we are invoking the notwithstanding clause before anything has even been battled out in court. Just to basically, here's my cheat card. I get to win this and move on, because she's dealing, again, these bills are full of, ambiguities and loopholes and very difficult to enforce. They're addressing problems that didn't exist in the first place. I invite anybody here on this chat to tell us how much of their life has been impacted by trans folk wanting to play sports, or how many times we have seen youth have medical procedures that they're not having currently anyway. How much of your life has been made more difficult because youth get to use the pronouns they wish at schools. In fact, in 20 plus years of doing work in schools with the Firefly Institute, we have found through peer-reviewed research, that when GSAs are introduced into schools, we see improvements in well-being for everybody. And in fact, one of the groups that has the most positive outcomes in these situations are cis heterosexual males, because this creating an environment in which people are accepted. It erodes this kind of toxic masculinity. It creates a more inclusive space. It benefits everybody. So these bills aren't helping anybody. There is no problem that they're fixing. This is about knowing that it's about doubling down. It's about not wanting to lose, and that's all this is.
I want to put this comment in front of both of you from Jay in our chat. Jay says the effects of puberty blockers are permanent. They're blocking changes that happen during puberty. And also some of the puberty blockers that are used could be used or are used for chemical castration. I'm not an expert. I don't know. Glynnis, you're shaking your head. Anna, let me go to you first, and I'll get both of you to comment on this. Anna?
Well, thanks, Ryan. Full disclosure, I am a woman who is transgender, and I was put on blockers as part of my affirming who I am. There is a lot of misinformation and disinformation that exists around puberty blockers. The reality is that they do not castrate your ability to reproduce, nor are their effects permanent. In fact, what they do is they slow down. It's almost like putting your body into a bit of remission when it comes to puberty, so that the effects of puberty don't take effect, causing a sense of dysphoria that further pushes someone into depression, anxiety, or just cripples them in being able to be productive in their everyday lives. If they were to stop that medication, the body would go into its natural. It would start reproducing its what it is naturally programmed to do. At the end of the day, we need to be very, very, very clear. The only permanent thing that is done is when a person that is 18 years old, these surgeries are not happening any less than that. When you are 18 years old, the age of majority, and should you choose to have gender affirming surgery, that is permanent. But in terms of the medications that doctors are using in consultation that align with a standard of care that exists, they are not chemically castrating, and they are not permanent. That is fundamentally false.
Dr. Lieb, I'll go to you in a second. I do want to note that Dr. Shazma Mathani is in our live chat right now, good friend of the show, co-host of the Doc Talk podcast. Dr. Mathani says the government has no place in the relationship between a doctor and a patient. What's next? Will they start deciding who's eligible for a knee replacement or what heart medications you're allowed? I'll reference the Alberta Medical Association, a statement released on its Instagram. People can check it out. I'm showing it right now. Dr. Brian Wurzba, the president of the AMA, when a government grants itself license to override physician judgment and patient consent, who at any stage of life will be next? The statement goes on to say that all Albertans should be alarmed that politicians are preparing to intrude on confidential medical conversations, interfere directly in therapeutic decisions, block healthcare delivery to a fragile, vulnerable population in desperate need of support, and discard evidence-based standards of care that have been safely and responsibly administered for years to support children and families. Glynnis, I wanted to get your comment on that, but I wanted to make sure we had those perspectives on the record.
Absolutely, and I'm grateful for that perspective too. And thank you, Anna, for stating that so eloquently. I think my late spouse was a transgender man and also a physician in this province who worked in this province providing care, and was a fierce advocate for access to supports, including puberty blockers, because as Anna said, when you are working with youth who have body dysphoria, this can slow the process down and allow them. And sometimes youth make decisions. They make decisions in various ways, but this gives time. What we see happening, and again, having worked with youth my whole adult life and working with 2S LGBTQ youth, is that the degree of panic and dysphoria that happens for somebody when they hit puberty and they are questioning their physical body and the physicality of it can have devastating effects. And there's no harm and no risk for using puberty blockers, as Anna said. And I don't blame people for being afraid, because they are being given misinformation. And as was so eloquently stated, we have politicians who are making medical decisions with no medical training, and then telling parents that they're making this decision to protect their rights. So you're now telling parents that medical experts can't make decisions about your child. You can't make decisions about your child, because no system should have authority over making decisions about your child. But they, as the government, are making decisions about children, again, with no expertise in working with gender and sexually diverse youth, no medical expertise, and no education expertise either. So here we are. This is a complete overreach, and it is terrifying that people that think it's okay that this government can make these kinds of decisions for anybody, because as has been repeatedly said, what is next? Where are we going next? When it comes to care throughout our lifespan, through anything that this government might, philosophically think is right or wrong. And we should not be allowed people that we elect to take over these decisions in our lives and take them away from trained experts. It's horrifying.
Dubious in our live chat. A lot of folks have a lot to say today. Dubious says we progress by being intolerant of intolerance. Believe what you like until it infringes on other people's rights. Dubious says it's pretty simple. Meantime, Alberta Girl is asking the same question that you just did. Dr. Lieb wonders what's the next target. You know, if they're using the notwithstanding clause in this case to end a court battle, exactly why? And I'm seeing the word normalizing used a lot in the context of the notwithstanding clause. Do you think that that's something that should be of concern to the 5 million people that call this province home?
You know, Ryan, I would argue that it's something that should be concerning to every single Canadian. You know, what we saw yesterday was the second time in Canada that a provincial government has nefariously used the notwithstanding clause to infringe on the human rights of vulnerable individuals. Scott Moe set the precedent in Saskatchewan, and Danielle Smith essentially said, hold my beer, and took it even further in a way that we have not seen ever before in Canada, breaking with that long legacy of Alberta, who once helped build the very rights that she is now infringing on. Thinking of the legacy of Premier Lougheed and, at the time, leader of the opposition, Grant Notley, whose leadership helped to bring the Alberta Bill of Rights to reality, which served as inspiration for the Canadian Charter of Rights. Of course, we can look to Premier Alison Redford and Premier Rachel Notley, who both took bold, decisive actions that helped to advance the human rights and protections of 2S LGBTQIA+ individuals. Instead, now we see a premier who is reaching for a mechanism that was never designed to be weaponized against vulnerable individuals. Rather, it was put in place as a rare safeguard, not a preemptive weapon, and using it to target vulnerable individuals, to infringe, erode, and eradicate their human rights is something that is unprecedented in Canada. And that should make every Canadian pause and reflect, because once it is invoked, you mentioned, Ryan, at the top, there is no mechanism to reverse this decision. This decision is now entrenched in our society for 5 years. The only mechanism that we have is at the ballot box when an election comes. So this is not a temporary decision. This is a generational impact. And so we need to go back to where the notwithstanding clause is a mechanism that politicians are not easily reaching for just to score some cheap political points with their base.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this audience is an engaged and informed, politically savvy audience, and I'm sure that they would agree with me. My impression of this, you know, you'll remember, I mean, way back, it feels like a lifetime ago when then Premier Ralph Klein mused about invoking the notwithstanding clause on marriage equality, and it caused ripples across the country when premiers have even invoked the words notwithstanding clause, let alone invoking the clause itself. It has caught the nation's attention. Bunny Slippers in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says it's now been invoked twice in a couple of weeks. When do we consider this to be an abuse of power? I've got multiple comments here in our chat. People wondering about marriage equality, people wondering about women's access to health resources. They're talking about abortion or a woman's right to choose. Jordan is concerned about the poor and the disabled in the province. I don't blame people for wondering where the line may be drawn or maybe who the next target might be. Dr. Lieb, can you see this as something? I mean, Anna talks about the ballot box. Could you see this as something that mobilizes an entire province? It is a divisive issue. There are people confused by elements of this. I saw Erica in our chat says, I agree with 2 elements of this. I disagree with 1. She didn't clarify which was which. Your thoughts?
People are allowed to have different opinions, and they're allowed to disagree, and they're allowed to have questions. But this is not about whether your views on, sexual and gender diversity. This is about the fact that, are we willing to live in a place with a government we elected that will invoke this to push through whatever they want and completely erase our rights as citizens, as people who voted them in? Are people not terrified of that? This should be something that absolutely mobilizes people, because if this doesn't, I don't know what will. And if this doesn't, we're in for some dark years ahead, because if this is setting precedent that people are going to accept a government just making whatever decision it wants and then shutting anybody down who challenges it, where are we moving towards in this province? Where are we moving towards this? And so everybody should be afraid of this. And I want to just point out how extra nefarious and hateful it is that they picked Trans Awareness Week to invoke the notwithstanding clause. We heard from a teenager at the legislature on Monday whose sibling died by suicide because of this. And they invoke it on just before Trans Day of Awareness. This is not a government doing something because they care about protecting our youth. That is a dog whistle, that is hateful, and that is targeted. And I want to point that out. And people should be afraid of what's happening right now in this province, regardless of your own personal views.
Shirley in our chat says in quotes, "Do I belong here?" She says that'll be the refrain from teachers and doctors or any newcomers thinking about moving to or staying in Alberta. Glynnis, I wanted to share with our audience the website for the Firefly Institute. And as soon as I called it up, something smacked me right in the face. And I'll get you and Anna to speak to it. We'll link to it in the show notes. People can find it by just Googling Firefly Institute, Fyre Fly Institute. Talk to us about what's right at the bottom. Talk to us about the quick exit. If I hit it, where does it take me? Takes me to Canadian weather. Why is that on the website?
That is on our website because for so many of the youth that we work with, the risks to them of harm, violence, and family exclusion are so high that if they are on our website and somebody comes into the room or comes into their space, they need to be able to get out fast. And so that's why we have that link there.
Yeah, I think that says so much in a gut punch kind of a way. Anna, I want to give last word to you. Your message right now to young Albertans or Albertans of any age that feel directly targeted by this, and to your fellow 4.5 million Albertans that are going to see or hear this interview.
We must decide what kind of a province we want to be. And are we going to be an Alberta where everyone who is proud to call this place their home is able to thrive as their true and authentic self? We now more than ever need to be there for each other. Reach out to your friends, your neighbors, your family, your colleagues, your classmates, your teammates, folks who right now our hearts are hurting at the actions of this government. We're scared. We are depressed. We have anxieties about what is to come next. And so we really need to rally around one another. And our path forward, we need our allies to really be bold in their actions. Invite us in to your spaces, introduce us to your workplaces or your schools or your networks, so that essentially you can put a human face to what is going on. And to those young people who are waking up today and are more scared to walk into school because that bully that is in their classroom just got more empowered and more emboldened, to that young person who woke up today feeling that they don't belong, I want you to know that there are folks like the ones here in this conversation, like Glynnis, like Ryan, who is giving a platform for this. There are so many folks who are fighting for you each and every day, and we will find a path forward. It's going to be hard right now. It's going to be dark right now, but don't give up, because your existence matters, and your existence is fundamental to the success of not only this province, but of this country. And never forget that.
That's Anna Murphy and Dr. Glynnis Lieb. Thanks for joining us on short notice to talk about this very important subject. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan.
In our live chat powered by Park Power, keep the comments coming. Wobbly Inc. says, I'm writing my MLA this morning, and the Premier to say no to Bill 9. Make sure you CC us on that. Talk at ryanjespersen.com. Wobbly Inc. says everybody should let the UCP know that they oppose Bill 9. Davis says, it's really frustrating being told that gender fluidity is unscientific by people who believe in a talking snake, a talking donkey, and people coming back from the dead. Davis with some old school Old Testament references there. Les says, this reminds me of segregation policies in the United States and how the Americans have moved on from that. Says the Premier just took Alberta back 50 years. Dwayne says Peter Lougheed got rid of the Social Credit Party, their backward policies. He would be disappointed with Danielle Smith for doing this. Super Chat Ken says, explain to me why the Premier couldn't have created an expert health panel of medical and psychological experts together with parents to treat cases. Other than that, he says, of course, we know why. He says, other than it wouldn't satisfy the Take Back Alberta or the MAGA folks. Others of you are debating on puberty blockers. Matt says it's gross that puberty blockers are being targeted because of fertility. Like, for starters, you could be destroying someone's mental well-being forever if they get stuck in a body that they don't want. Cherie says the federal government needs to pass laws to protect these kids, but Mark Carney has to walk a fine line with Danielle Smith right now, so I'm not sure that it would happen. Let us know what you think. You can keep the comments coming in the live chat. We'll revisit this later in this episode of Real Talk. Arno Kopecky's ready to go to talk pipelines to the West Coast. Don't forget, you can always send us an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com.
Edmonton is here because the river is here. So we care for it, protect it, share it. The water of the North Saskatchewan sustains all of us. It's a big job to treat and deliver it, river to tap, to over 1 million people, so you can have and enjoy a glass of the Sask. On tap, made local by Epcor.
While we're talking about young people, Real Talk is proud to support UCAN Youth Services, and we want to make sure that they're on your radar this holiday season. We spent a lot of time explaining to you how they are transforming young lives. Let me correct myself. They are empowering young adults to transform their own lives through 3 different programs. They have their relentless outreach workers working with young people 12 to 17 that are in and out of the justice system, in and out of the backs of cop cars, to be quite honest with you. And then their Road to Work and their Verto project, which are Earn While You Learn employment readiness programs. But right now, I want to talk to you about an opportunity to make Christmas brighter for young people across Alberta, in particular the Metro Edmonton region. You can stuff a stocking at ucan.ca for a young adult entering the workforce. These are the little things that make a big difference, like a bus pass or warm socks if they're going to be out on a construction site, or even a coffee cart. This Christmas, fill a stocking that removes barriers and builds confidence for Edmonton youth starting their first jobs. You can find different levels of involvement: a coffee gift card for $10, $20 for bus tickets, $15 for a toque and mittens. It goes on from there. You can even gift a full stocking for $100 by making a donation today at ucan.ca. If you're considering a career change, if you're considering leveling up your readiness to enter the job market, or maybe you've just always wanted to pursue a post-secondary experience, Athabasca University is Canada's open university with world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. You can browse those programs and courses at athabascau.ca. That includes their AU MBA, but there's dozens and dozens of undergraduate programs, grad programs, online courses, and professional development opportunities. You can learn more about the AU Advantage, including financial supports, transfer credits, and more on their website. That's athabascau.ca. California Closets, proudly Canadian and the best in the business. You might say top shelf when it comes to custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home. Make the most of your space with their custom organizational systems that are designed and manufactured in Alberta and guaranteed for life. Whether it's your garage that desperately needs attention, maybe it's a Murphy bed to transform that home office into a guest room, or maybe it's that custom closet and wardrobe that your primary bedroom absolutely deserves. You can learn more about it today. Price it out as part of a free consultation. You can book that today at californiaclosets.ca. And I want to shout out our friends at Solar by Kubi. I'm really looking forward to seeing them tonight at Edify's Top 40 Under 40. That celebration goes on at the Winspear Center. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, you've still got time to get your tickets at edifyedmonton.com and join us there. The team at Kubi is sponsoring the first responders that are going to be in attendance at that. It's all part of their commitment to those who are protecting our community. More on that is the Powering Those Who Protect program. Solar by Kubi is offering a 5% discount on solar systems for first responders, including police, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, nurses, search and rescue, 911 dispatchers, and active members of the Canadian Armed Forces across Alberta and BC. You can also combine that discount with existing rebates and government incentives. That helps, of course, lower the upfront cost of going solar. It improves your return on investment. You can learn more about the Powering Those Who Protect program by visiting kubi.ca. We'll get to more of your comments on Bill 9, the Alberta government invoking the notwithstanding clause, a little bit later on in this episode. But as you may have seen just hours ago, the Globe and Mail reporting that Ottawa and Alberta are close to a deal, an energy accord that includes an oil pipeline to the BC coast. It's perfect timing to check in with Arno Kopecky, an Alberta-raised, Vancouver-based journalist who covers national politics for Canada's National Observer and environmental affairs for The Walrus. Arno is the author of The Oil Man and the Sea. Arno, welcome back to the show. It's been too long since we've spoken with you.
It has been too long, Ryan. It is great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, your thoughts. I mean, I want to get into your sailing mission, a 4-month sailing expedition along BC's north coast that gave you, I would say, unprecedented insight into some of these proposed pipelines. In particular, you were looking at the route that the oil tankers would traverse if the Northern Gateway pipeline were to be built. But your thoughts on this news that Alberta and Ottawa may be close to a deal that would see a new pipeline built?
Yeah, we're all watching as closely as anyone else. These deals are getting made in rooms that very few people have access to. What I was in the room, though, about 2 weeks ago when David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia, of course, signed a declaration with every significant First Nation leader in British Columbia calling on Carney to uphold the tanker ban. And of course, as long as that North Coast tanker ban is in place, any pipeline to the North Coast is really a non-starter. I think basically, the North Coast is really the epicenter of opposition in BC to this pipeline idea. And so the North Coast, the Coastal First Nations, which is a coalition of about 9 First Nations, the Haida, Heiltsuk, Haisla, Owikino, a few others, they've been at the forefront of opposition to this pipeline since, when I went on that sailing trip 12 years ago. Some of the same leaders that I met at that point were the ones who were the plaintiffs in the court case that quashed Northern Gateway in 2014, which then Justin Trudeau ultimately, instead of appealing, decided to just say, okay, you guys don't want this, no is no. So here we are, deja vu, 13 years later, 2025, after my sailing trip, and these same leaders now also together with the leadership of every significant First Nation organization in British Columbia, the BC Assembly of First Nations, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, the First Nations Leadership Council. This represents over 100 First Nations in the province, they're all together with the province of British Columbia and the government of British Columbia have been like, no, this isn't happening. So we are seeing a train wreck in the making here if indeed the reporting is true, and we're going to have this, and Carney is actually going to push this through for Danielle Smith.
Yeah, it's a big one, and the Globe's got two of their investigative heavy hitters on it. It's Robert Fife and Stephanie Levitz that are reporting on this.
Yeah, they're brilliant, so I don't doubt their words for a second.
Yeah, so they're citing sources within the federal and Alberta governments. They say that they're expressing optimism, these government sources, that a deal could be announced in time for the UCP's AGM, which will be held in your home city, by the way, in our proud city of Edmonton, Alberta. That's November 28th. That kicks off. So this is a shortened timeline.
That's my birthday, Ryan. These the stars are aligning in all kinds of amazing ways. So maybe I can come and let's throw down.
What happens if Arno Kopecky gets a new pipeline to the West Coast for his birthday?
Oh man, dreams do come true. No, this is crazy. My mind is getting blown by the minute here. I mean, the reporting this morning, it's just wild to watch this. Like I said, it really is unbelievable that like the setup for this shitstorm. It reminds me of a nautical disaster. Is a good metaphor for what's happening here. Like there is going to be, I don't know if Carney and Danielle Smith appreciate the scale of opposition here. Carney's threading a really crazy tightrope. I wish I could get inside his mind or go for a beer with him. I understand obviously he's trying to appease Alberta, and it seems like, Carney's an Edmonton guy too. So we all get the need for energy. I appreciate personally the incredible financial strain and political strain that Canada is under. Our healthcare systems are crashing, education systems are crashing. Everybody's on strike, from postal workers to teachers, you name it. We need money. Nothing pays the bills like oil and gas, for sure. And Alberta has a lot of power to derail Ottawa's best plans. So, I appreciate the pressures in play, but I would have to say, I'd like to echo what First Nations have been saying, and the province of BC, and what David Eby has articulated, is that tens and tens of billions of dollars are already being generated with the major projects that are based in BC. LNG pipelines are coming through gas pipelines are coming through to the North Coast. LNG export facilities are up and running, a whole bunch more of them. I think about half, maybe 40% of the major projects on Carney's list are already based in BC. And that relies on the consent of First Nations, who have an incredible amount of legal power, as the first Northern Gateway saga revealed. I think that was the very first time that big industry and the federal government came to really appreciate the kind of legal power that First Nations had. It's hard to believe, but this started 20 some years ago. And that was only 20 years after the Constitution gave First Nations really the right to fight these things in court. So it's just kind of an amazing historical trajectory that has gotten us to this moment. And now it's all, blowing up in our face, I have to say.
Yeah. So on the table to support this new project would be a limited exemption, say sources to the Globe, to the current ban on oil tankers to the BC coast, a plan to move ahead with changes to industrial carbon pricing in support of scaling up carbon capture technology. We've been talking about that a lot on the show, and a lowering or removal of the industrial emissions cap. A lot of people, and I would imagine you've heard this before, Arno, a lot of people will say, well, BC's already got a pipeline. BC's already got tankers, a route that goes basically right through Vancouver, and it's been operating safely for decades. So, what's the problem with another one up north? What would you say?
Yeah, I'm looking out the window. I live in Vancouver like right now, and I can see Burrard Inlet, and I can see tankers go by once or twice a week. The difference is geography. The North Coast is just utterly incomparable. That's a shot from the air of some of the regions that these tankers would be going through. So unlike the South Coast, where tankers are safely traversing today, the North Coast is this unbelievable region of fjords and hundreds of islands, and just insane, 4 times a day, you've got these 3-knot currents that go through. There's rock reefs everywhere. It's some of the most dangerous waters in the world. You've got Hecate Strait, where, these unbelievable hurricane force winds can pop up on a dime all winter long. Sometimes they collide, so you've got 26-meter waves, and Hecate Strait is so shallow that sometimes these waves, the troughs between the waves, the ocean floor is exposed. It's hard to capture from the safety of our homes in cities just how insane a marine navigational environment this is. But it really, that is the main major difference. And reassurances of the latest technology and tanker safety that come from prairie premiers and pipeline engineers who have absolutely no marine navigation experience really don't carry a lot of water here on the coast. There are, as we speak, Ryan, actually, there's a container barge that has lost its power and is being monitored by Healthsook and the Coast Guard. So there's a ship that's floating. There have been hundreds and hundreds of ships line the bottom of this ocean. It's part of what's known as the graveyard of the Pacific. So that's the difference. Down here, the waters are pretty calm. It's still, we still worry. There was opposition to this TMX as well, because we worry about the risks of a tanker spill. But the risks down here are, really a fraction of what they are up there.
Arno Kopecky joins us in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Arno is the author of The Oil Man and the Sea, Navigating the Northern Gateway, which, by the way, I should mention was shortlisted for a 2014 Governor General's Award. Arno, when you embarked on that journey, a 4-month journey, I mean, that's not a light commitment, obviously. It must have been an incredible life experience, I have to say. Yeah, and we're open to hearing stories on it. I'm curious to know, though, as an author, as a journalist, we go into anything, I think, with preconceived notions. We go into any assignment, let alone something big like this, with an idea maybe on where we stand or what we think the relevant facts to be or what we perceive opposition to look like. But how did those 4 months of your professional career and your personal life influence how you feel about this file today? Like, did it change your mind on anything based on conversations you had with stakeholders or things that you saw?
I wish I could say I had some amazing, revelation frame of mind. Mostly I was in a state of perpetual mild terror because I'm not a sailor. I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta. It was my first time on a sailboat. And we sailed those waters in the summertime, so it was as good as it can ever get. And yet every once in a while a nautical disaster would happen, and they just happen really quickly. Nevertheless, what can I say? That region is just so unbelievably wild. You showed some of the pictures. The resilience of that entire ecosystem. I think one thing that did leap out at me was, this used to be it had been fished to death. Whaling had eliminated almost all the humpback whales from this region. Forestry had just hammered that whole zone. But industry has really sort of declined over the last 20, 30 years. And already by the time I sailed it in 2012, you could just see life exploding. We saw orca whales, salmon were migrating, bears, wolves, eagles, every kind of life you could imagine. And these kinds of places are, I have to say, increasingly rare in the world today. We get accused of NIMBYism, of just saying, well, we don't want it in my backyard, and that this is just a myopic view. But I think if you step back and look at the global picture, sure, let's do that. We're living at a time when ecosystems around the world are just getting hammered. The oceans are running out of fish all over the place. Forests are declining. And here we have, on the north coast of BC, an incredibly robust region that is just exploding with life. And to get to see that firsthand and sail through it and meet the people, some of the people, these First Nations communities who have lived here literally since the last ice age and have this uninterrupted connection to that region, and hear their stories. Very quickly, this became less about oil tanker traffic for me, and really kind of immersing myself in this landscape and the people whose languages literally reflect the landscape. And for them, Northern Gateway was just the latest intervention from the white man, I have to say. And it was, for me, the first time that I had really gone into First Nations communities as a journalist, and there's an extractive element to that as well. So it was a real balancing act. Here I am sort of speaking for them right now, and that makes me uncomfortable too. Nevertheless, I feel it's important to amplify their perspective in any way that I can. And that perspective is just totally clear. And even then, they said, we might win this fight, but somebody's going to come back again and try this again. And at that time, I thought, no, come on. If Northern Gateway gets defeated, they've spent, $500 million on this. There's no way it's going to happen again. And sure enough, 12 years later, here we are again. And this very morning, we've got the Prime Minister of Canada, a Liberal Prime Minister, announcing a deal with the Premier of Alberta that we're gonna probably very likely have a deal to push this through over the express wishes of the Premier of Alberta and literally every single First Nation in BC, not just on the coast. So it's that to me is kind of, I think, the most surprising thing 12 years out. It makes me feel naive as a journalist to know that here we are again. I really thought that once that tanker ban got put in place and the federal court had said, no, First Nations were not consulted, I thought this particular project was put to bed, but I stand corrected.
Huh. I mean, obviously Carney's been trying to heal Ottawa's relationship with Alberta. That's obvious. Yeah. And I think that there have been public displays of that effort. I mean, the Calgary Stampede, the images you couldn't ignore of Carney and Smith laughing and posing together, and you just wouldn't see that with the previous prime minister and any Alberta premier outside of Rachel Notley. I think that's safe to say.
Totally.
Explorer Hollis in our chat says, why do we never hear opposition to the disgusting poop cruise ships, the big cruise ships that are in and out of the West Coast constantly and are actually factually polluting the waters with everybody, impacting everybody on the West Coast? Let me ask you this. I mean, that's kind of funny. It's also a great point. I guess it's not funny if you're behind it on a pleasure craft, but I mean, there's
don't go snorkeling behind a cruise.
Yeah, don't go snorkeling behind a cruise ship anytime. But like, there are First Nations, the government of BC for that matter, that heartily support gas pipelines and LNG tankers, right? Like, why is it a double standard? Why not oil?
Basically what happens if an LNG tanker hits a reef and cracks open, that gas floats into the atmosphere. So absolutely not good from a climate perspective, but totally different ball of wax from what happens with an oil spill where you coat hundreds of kilometers of coastline. Exxon Valdez spill from 1989 is, of course, I think the one around here that people cite all the time. Still recovering. That region is still recovering from the impacts of that. Probably the most recent one in our lifetimes was the Deepwater Horizon spill when in the Gulf Coast that coated Louisiana and I think parts of Texas. That cost $40 billion to clean up, and which doesn't capture the shell fisheries, shrimp fisheries were just crushed and destroyed and have still not recovered. And so that the damage that an oil spill, a substantial oil spill, does to a coastline is it just devastates the coast. And this is a region, I think it's worth pointing out, Carney and his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, have taken great lengths to protect the coast. And they've created a really landmark series of marine protected areas because the fisheries there are so productive. I mean, it's easy for me to wax poetic about the beautiful ecosystems and I genuinely feel that is to be true. I wish every Canadian could just go experience that and immerse yourself in that experience. But there is a financial play here. The fisheries there generate a lot of money. Tourism generates a lot of money, and it can be generated in perpetuity. One oil spill would destroy that forever. And so that's the difference. The damage that an oil spill can do, you can't clean those things up. The industry standard is it's considered a great success if you can clean up 10% of the oil.
Stephen is in our live chat. Always appreciate hearing from Stephen, who says, bravo, Mark Carney. Says, finally a middle left-leaning prime minister. I mean, some have compared Mark Carney's recent budget to a budget rubber stamped by Stephen Harper. So, I mean, there's different takes on how Carney is governing or what lane he's picking. But, Canada is in the midst. Arno, I know that you're not going to disagree. of a growing financial crisis, right?
Yeah.
While the Americans basically have turned into, I mean, some would describe them as fascist enemies. I can at least say
I have used the F word, yes.
You have used that F word yourself.
I have, yeah.
The president of the United States does not appear to be particularly concerned with Canada's economic future outside what would impact America or maybe benefit him personally. But there is a consensus belief that our trade away from the United States needs to supersede absolutely everything else. And I have to imagine that that would even factor into a conversation on a choice, a hypothetical, let's say, between Northern Gateway 2.0, let's call it, and Keystone XL as an example. So as a journalist, sure, but as a Canadian, how do you reconcile that reality?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good point. Well, a couple things to speak in Mark Carney's language, if I may. A couple things. So first, if we're going to talk about diversifying our trade, surely we can think bigger than diversifying oil markets alone. Let's diversify the things that we create and sell, not just where we sell our oil to. And so Carney is doing that. And, I'm actually a lot more bullish on Carney in general than most of my environmental cohort. I really appreciate a lot of what he's doing. I have a lot of sympathy for the fine lines he has to walk and the pressures that he and any politician who is in charge of keeping our hospitals running and our schools running. That it's just an insane amount of pressure that those of us who sit back and look at protecting ecosystems don't have to worry about. So I am super sympathetic to that. But it's happening, and northern BC is exporting a ton of LNG, and we're opening up that entire North Coast region where the pipeline would go through. Mining is about to explode there. We're creating tens of billions of dollars. We just built a massive pipeline in TMX, that has generated, I believe, $4 billion a year in royalties for Alberta, and another $1 billion a year for Canada. So these things are happening is the first point that diversification is the first point. Let's think of it in bigger terms than just new markets for oil. These things are happening is the second point. And I had a third point and it's just slipped my mind, but we'll get back to it. Those are the two big ones.
Arno, I haven't fact-checked this, so I may be putting you on the spot, but I am just curious. Cascade in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says, isn't it weird that when Northern Gateway was first being proposed, 31 out of 40 First Nations supported it? Is that accurate? Was it a 75% support from First Nations along the route? Do you know off the top of your head?
I know off the top of my head that it's not accurate. There was over 100 First Nations who signed the Fraser Declaration in opposition to that one. The Enbridge had an MOU with, it was reported about 25, 30 First Nations who did support it. They did not publicly reveal who they were. There was a promise of anonymity for that. But even if you take them at their word, 25 or 30 nations supported it. As today, there would be First Nations, like there are First Nations who support it. And I'm very hesitant to play the let's do our wave which First Nations support and which oppose, but it's just a numbers fact that the number of nations who oppose vastly outnumber the number who support, and those who support tend to be in Alberta. So I think a better way to look at this is to look at the Alberta-BC divide. The people who support this project, both in terms of whether you're First Nations or not, tend to be more in Alberta, far from the effects than they are in British Columbia. Again, not to say that there aren't British Columbians who support this project. I don't think you can talk about any project in the country that has unanimous feelings one way or the other. Of course, this is a divisive issue, but the amount of united opposition to Northern Gateway 2.0, if anything, has grown from the first time. I mean, that expression of solidarity between David Eby's, not just him, but his entire cabinet at the BC NDP convention just a few days ago, standing ovation for saying that we are not going to allow a new pipeline to go through. That got unanimous support from the entire BC NDP caucus. And that solidarity with BC First Nations, again, every leadership council, First Nations Leadership Council in the province has united with the BC government in opposition. That's extremely rare. There is not much that those groups all agree on, and this is one. It's huge. And I guess one final point, I remembered what I wanted to say in answer to, shouldn't we diversify our trade? Let's talk to the oil companies themselves. Enbridge, in a recent investor call from, I think, August, the president of Enbridge described access to the U.S. markets as the gold standard, and they are focused on selling their oil into the U.S. So I think the companies themselves and their investors are not worried about being able to sell their oil into the U.S. They are trying to gain access, and so that's why you have, I believe, 1 million barrels a day of increased egress have just been announced. I mean, oil sands are doing really well right now. They are like, Enbridge has all of these lines into the U.S. They've managed to expand their capacity to open up hundreds of millions of barrels more per day going down to the U.S. So, again, I appreciate the need to not rely on the U.S. Donald Trump could do anything, including just shut those taps off. But that, the oil companies aren't worried about that. On our list of concerns of things that Trump is likely to shut off, I think oil is pretty far down on that list. I don't want to downplay the risks of that for a second. But yeah, I do think just the scale of opposition is striking, and Carney is really playing with fire on this one, as much as I support a lot of what he's worth.
Yeah, I would say that, like, just to state the obvious, shutting down oil and gas, number one, is not an option and not happening. No. Number two would decimate Alberta. Number three would blow a huge hole in Canada's economy. I mean, there's like obvious things. I mean, we've welcomed many voices to this show, right? Like champions of oil and gas and those who want to leave it all in the ground. I remember Zipporah Berman had a particularly memorable interview on this show. I think you got to sort of try to find that sweet spot, right? But Ms. KD,
I know Zipporah. I love Zipporah, and I totally disagree with that take myself. I'm not here to say we should shut oil down. I'm not even saying, like, dude, Alberta is producing more oil than ever in history.
Right now, more than ever before.
More than ever before. That industry is doing really, really well. So this narrative that Alberta is somehow being constrained, that BC and the rest of Canada is denying every request that we just shut everything down is bonkers. It's wild. I mean, it is just totally contradicts reality. And a lot of people, I think, especially supporters of the UCP and the current federal Conservative Party, aren't aware of this. I spent April on the campaign trail following Pierre Poilievre, and I went to like 15 rallies, and so I spoke to supporters all over the country. And I didn't try to push back on them, but I did suggest every once in a while, like, did you know that Alberta is producing more oil than ever before in history, and selling it and making more money off of oil than the province ever has? And they were like, no, you're lying. That's not true. That can't be true. There's no way. And so we're living in the part of this story is just the information ecosystem that we're living in that creates this perspective that a lot of people believe that Alberta is just a victim of a sort of randomly malicious rest of Canada that is intent on restraining their best impulses. No, there is somewhere, but the idea that you should get every single thing you want and ask for, and if you don't, that you are being somehow punished unfairly. I have a 10-year-old daughter. She has moved on beyond that phase, but not too long ago, that was how she felt.
Ms. KD in our chat says you cannot heal the relationship with Alberta at the expense of BC. She says that's ridiculous. Albertans have long proven their memories are short, and they will still not vote Liberal or give any credit. It's fair to say. I mean, the federal government essentially covered the cost of TMX, which ballooned to what, Arno? It was just under $40 billion, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think 34,
when it was all said and done. And I think that Albertans rewarded the federal government for that by shaving off a seat. Now with 3 Liberal MPs instead of 4 in the province of Alberta. So you traveled with, or you followed at least the campaign of Pierre Poilievre leading up to that April 28th federal election. He's been telling Carney to basically just get out of the way on this and let the pipeline get built. You're talking a lot about David Eby and those in the BC legislature that vociferously oppose this, but I mean, is Ottawa the only thing stopping this pipeline? I mean, aside from it, I don't mean to brush them to the side, but there will no doubt be activists. There will be people, I'm not saying this in glib fashion, chaining themselves to trees and standing in front of bulldozers. And obviously there will be prominent opposition. The RCMP will be called. Everybody knows how this goes. We've seen it before. But what are you expecting to see, or what could happen, Arno?
Oh man, your guess is as good as mine, Ryan, to be honest. I mean, huge protests for one, legal battles. Part of me wonders, is Carney just playing a game where he's like, let's let Alberta get this into the major projects office, as he has said of some of the other projects. He's been quick to say, this doesn't mean the project is approved or going to happen. It just means we're going to let it go forward and let the consultation take place. So perhaps he is gambling that no investor will step forward, because if I was a private investor, I would be somewhat trepidatious if I looked at everything that I've just said, given the landscape of opposition in throughout British Columbia. So perhaps that is Mark Carney's game. He's a clever guy, and he's playing some pretty high stakes poker here. So yeah, I don't know, but I would like to point out that the first Northern Gateway was proposed, the Enbridge first proposed it in 2004, and then Harper became Prime Minister in 2006. And so for 10 years, Enbridge had a conservative federal government and a BC Liberal government, which was basically a conservative government in BC, which was lukewarm but somewhat supportive. And in the course of those 10 years, Stephen Harper and the federal Conservatives rewrote a lot of laws. They went 100% to bat for Northern Gateway. They rewrote the Environmental Impact Assessment Act. He had his environment minister accused environmental groups of laundering money for foreign organizations. They audited every major environmental group in Canada, the David Suzuki Foundation, Sierra Club, Greenpeace, all got audited. Tides Canada, the federal government, this was the thing that actually created a lot of the bad blood that we just take for granted today between the environmental community and conservatives at every level. It didn't always used to be that way. Federal conservatives, in fact, supported the Great Bear Rainforest Agreement and gave it a lot of money. This is the Great Bear Rainforest, is the region on the north coast that you showed some pictures of, where the oil tanker route would go through. It's that collection of islands and seas. The federal conservatives supported that in 2004, but then the very First Nations and environmental groups that they had worked with stabbed them in the back by activating against Northern Gateway. So that created this 10-year war. And even with an entire federal government apparatus working on behalf and with Enbridge to get Northern Gateway to go through, they weren't able to do it. So that to me says something about whether this is Justin Trudeau's fault. And it also says a lot about Mark Carney's chances of pushing this through, if that's what he really wants to do and intends to do. I have a feeling there are some really high stakes poker moves being made here. And perhaps, conspiratorially, I would think that maybe Mark Carney is saying, let's give Alberta this thing. We'll let this process ride out a little bit longer. And then when no investor steps forward and nobody's actually putting money on the table, because as David Eby keeps saying, there is no private money on the table for this project. There is no project really to discuss. So maybe that's what's going on. But maybe I'm overthinking it, and maybe Carney thinks, we'll just keep talking and eventually this will happen. I don't know.
Well, check this out, Johnny. I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball. Let me try to play a clip here from my laptop. We had Max Fawcett on the show just yesterday, the 18th of November, Arno, and have a listen to this. Here's what Max had to say about exactly what you're talking about.
If you're a business, your job is to manage risk and reward. And the risk of overbuilding expensive oil projects that take 20, 30 years to pay out, right as the world might be starting to turn away from fossil fuels, is not worth the reward. These companies have increasingly over the last, call it 5 years, been focused on returning all of their free cash flow in dividends, in share buybacks. Their shareholders do not want them to build these mega projects. They want them to run profitable businesses. And that is what they're going to continue doing. I think Danielle Smith has made a lot of political hay out of fighting with Ottawa and defending the oil and gas industry. And I think she will continue doing it until it stops working. I think, the political stroke of genius here is that the federal government is deciding to call her bluff and get out of the way. They see the economic reality here. They understand how the global oil markets work. And Mark Carney is basically saying, you know what? I'm not going to be the boogeyman here. I'm going to get out of the way. You go ahead. You try to build this new 1 million barrel per day pipeline and encourage upstream companies to fill it with, this much more expensive oil coming from these much more expensive projects. Let's see how that goes for you.
Let's see how that goes for you. That from Max Fawcett. Essentially, I guess the same argument that you're bringing, or at least the same hypothesis that you're bringing to the table.
Never argue with Max Fawcett, especially about pipelines.
Well, there's a lot of people that really love to argue with Max Fawcett, as a matter of fact. I learned that the very first time I brought him on a talk show. Yeah. Arno, I want to thank you for your advocacy on this and let people know, again, number one, we've been talking in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West to Arno Kopecky, his book, The Oil Man and the Sea, Navigating the Northern Gateway. You can find that wherever you find great books, and we'll link directly to the publisher in the show notes on YouTube and on the podcast. But also, do mine eyes tell me this is true? Following you on Instagram at Arno Kopecky, were you just awarded yesterday a Messenger of Biodiversity Fellowship from the Sitka Foundation?
True story, Ryan.
Wow, pal.
I am a badass messenger of biodiversity. I am here to fight for those who don't have a voice, and those who do. Yeah, but Ryan, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Yeah, please follow along. I'm in great company. As you can see, there's a ton of brilliant journalists, too many to name here, but the Sitka Foundation has given us all a little jolt to tell some of these stories, and I think they're important stories, and they're actually not just, I hate important stories, but I like good stories that are fun to read and to listen to, so follow along.
Congratulations. I see that the post was liked by Ann Castleman, who's really an intrepid and very talented journalist based on Canada's West Coast, and actually a member of our Real Talk Advisory Board. So that's pretty cool stuff. A
person I hold dearly and in super high regard, and a mutual friend, I believe. So right. these worlds are small and precious. Let's take care of them.
All right. Edmonton-raised, Vancouver-based author and journalist Arno Kopecky joining us. Thanks for doing this, Arno. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, you bet. And Real Talkers, we encourage you to let us know what you think about what you've just heard. Obviously, different opinions in the live chat, which is great. We encourage that. We want to have robust debate. We'll bring different perspectives to the table. You can tell us what you think. Don in the live chat, I didn't see if there was any background to Don's comment here, but I do see he says Ryan laughed at offering cleanup yesterday. He'd be talking about our November 18th episode. So there you go, says Don. I don't know if I laughed at it. Max had floated the idea that Alberta may, and I'm probably going to use the wrong phrase, but Alberta, Johnny, may underwrite or look to underwrite or guarantee the cleanup of any spill that may occur with a new pipeline project. In other words, the province would be on the hook if an insurance company didn't want to touch it. The province would be on the hook as part of a guarantee to British Columbia and the rest of Canada that if something went sideways, that Alberta would manage it.
Pinky swear.
Yeah, we pinky swear and we promise. If I've learned anything from Arno talks about his 10-year-old, I have a 10-year-old too, and they're still rocking the my fingers were crossed behind my back thing. I'm not sure if you remember that from elementary school. I don't know, Don, if I laughed at it, but I'm not sure that Albertans I'm sure some Albertans, if you're a pipeliner, if you work in trenching, if you work in the energy industry, if you have a white-collar job that really does well when oil exports are booming and there's more access to markets, and I know some of you will write in and say everyone will benefit with better access to more markets, and on that I agree. I'm not sure if everybody would like to see the province, in other words, us, underwriting potential cleanup costs, which could be, depending on the magnitude of any potential disaster, very significant.
Yeah. Arno, first of all, he's still in there. I see him looking at me. Great name. Love the name.
Arno Kopecky? That sounds to me like he was either going to be...
Sounds like a football player.
An author. He could have been, or like a great tennis player.
Yeah.
Right? Kopecky, game, set, match.
Kopecky does it again. But loved his comment about, I think it's often swept under the rug that, like, Alberta has a lot of projects that are either in this province or they have phases related to, like, there are pipelines being built. There's 5 to 10. I just looked them up. Major, if you want to use the word major, pipeline projects that are approved and being built. And like, I'll say a few. Everyone knows the Yellowhead mainline natural gas pipeline. You've got the NEBC connector pipeline project, the portion here in Alberta. I always pronounce this wrong. Is the Pouce Coupe pipeline?
No, I think it's Poop Cruise, Johnny. It's the Poop
Cruise. We got
Cruise.
The NGL North System Phase 2. So you've got a lot of stuff being built, but if it's not large crude oil export, like, people think that we're being held back here in Alberta. Alberta, like you guys both just said, is producing oil and is set to produce hundreds more millions of barrels of oil. It's never been producing this much ever in existence.
Look at this post from Alberta's Energy Minister, Brian Jean. This is, 4 days ago? With the completion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, we are breaking records for production and export. Our oil is now going to countries all over the world, especially Asia.
So what are we
I
upset
applaud
about?
that. I think that's great.
And you see Carney's announcement the other day about, all the things he wants to put into development. And I read the comment section because, of course, I'm looking for the Alberta accounts, and they're all saying, now do a pipeline. We're doing more than we ever have, and there's more projects coming. But if it's not a large crude export pipeline going to major, like, people just think it's not even worth it. But this province is being very successful right now in oil.
Yeah. I like this from Ambustion. Thank you for your YouTube channel membership. Ambustion says, I really like that our Prime Minister is making consistent moves to improve our self-reliance, and it's disappointing that people are calling him out for it and saying that he supports the UCP. Ambustion says that's just silly. Alberta Girl says, I don't want another pipeline on my land ever again, and I wish I had the right to say no, but that thanks to conservative legislation, says Alberta Girl, I can't even get compensated for my true damages or really say no about anything. Check out our recent episode with Drew Anderson from the Narwhal that talked about Alberta's orphan wells and environmental liabilities. That was, and I'm just showing it to you right now, Johnny, that was just 5 days ago. That was on the 14th of November. You can check it out here on my screen. Big Oil betrays landowners and taxpayers, that conversation with Drew Anderson. And before you have a spaz and send me an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com that Jespersen doesn't understand where his bread is buttered and Jespersen's some left-wing pinko commie that's attacking oil and gas. We're talking about the bad faith players who owe hundreds of millions of dollars in property taxes to municipalities, who owe essentially reclamation costs, who owe dough to landowners, including farmers and ranchers in the province of Alberta. It is an indefensible position. You wouldn't believe the comments on my social media. Well, you would believe them. But since we posted the highlights of that conversation with Drew Anderson, people talking about how the show is anti-Alberta, the show is communist. I don't know what's anti-Alberta more than polluting the land, polluting the water, operating without paying taxes, and ignoring the best wishes of communities and what you owe to individual everyday Albertans. If that is pro-Alberta and calling it out as anti-Alberta, people have lost their damn minds.
Especially when we're making money, and I don't want to say hand over fist because it makes it sound like there aren't people struggling and dealing with the cost of affordability in life here in Alberta and all across Canada. But like when you show posts like that, when Brian Jean's saying, hey, record numbers, but then you've got these stories of the companies not cleaning up after they're done, or even, like we had those people on the show, and that show was just so eye-opening for me that, like, first of all, I didn't know that you cannot say no at all.
No.
To any oil infrastructure on your land.
Well, not just oil, to
farmer.
Be fair, like highways, rail lines.
If it's in the federal interest or the provincial interest,
the nation's interest,
pretty much say no. But then to be promised that it'll be cleaned up eventually, and we all know that's going to be like, 10, 20, 30 years. But even then, to not have any movement on it. and to be owed hundreds of millions of dollars. It's just ridiculous to me.
Steve says, this guy, Arno, needs to be fact-checked. I've read a lot of literature that the majority of British Columbians support getting our energy to the coast as BC has become unaffordable for most people. Steve's not wrong in the sense that attitudes are changing across the country when it comes to people's openness around energy expansion. That is true. And I'm sure that Arno would welcome fact checks. I mean, Arno's on the show reporting what is true. He's talking to us about what he observed on the campaign trail from Pierre Poilievre. He's talking to us about what Mark Carney is saying and what it sounds like the feds may be announcing with the province of Alberta as a kind of sort of partner. He's talking about David Eby. Are you saying that he wants to come back in?
Well, he's still there. If we want to fact check him, let's just ask him.
Well, no, I mean, what Arno's still hanging out here in our Real Talk green room, which is great. Our virtual green room, Arno, which is unfortunately not as cool as our real life green room, which has a cold beer fridge, and of course, beautiful cream liqueurs presented by our friends at Hanson Distillery. So I apologize.
Next time I'll be sure to come in person
remotely.
Absolutely no champagne here.
Yeah, which is really tragic. But I would just say, I mean, to Steve, and someone's going to say, well, what is this going to be, some sort of a meaningful fact check on the fly? Is Arno going to fact check himself? But if Steve walked up to you at a book signing and said that, what would you say about the fact that records show, that statistics show, that polling indicates that more British Columbians are open to energy expansion? What would you say to him?
I'd say he might be right there, that if you did a poll of British Columbians at large, there might be more who are in support of pipelines than before. If you drill down into which specific pipelines they support, I haven't seen any poll. I would love to see the poll that says a majority of British Columbians want a North Coast oil pipeline built. I think what we're open to is more industry, perhaps more natural gas and LNG exports for sure. But what I'm really talking about is not what the average Joe thinks. I'm talking about what the BC government thinks and what the First Nations who are directly affected and also just First Nations at large think. That's indisputable. I was in the room with David Eby, several members of his cabinet, and every single powerful First Nation leader. Like I said, the Assembly of BC First Nations, UBCIC, Coastal First Nations, they all signed this memorandum calling on Carney to hold up the tanker ban and basically not allow this tanker to go through. So that's indisputable. Where exactly the majority of BC sentiment is on a particular issue, I can't say. I
have here. Let me read you this, and I just want to call up Angus Reid's website here. Let me see if I can find the specific polling here. So angusreid.org is where people can find it. So this is polling from, what's the date? It's 2025, Arno. I don't know if I can get the exact. Let me see. It was released October 9th. So the polling would have been conducted, I'm assuming, maybe August into September. So the Angus Reid Institute poll 2025 found that 56%, Johnny, you can show it, 56% of BC residents support the idea of a pipeline from northern Alberta to the northwest BC coast. 56% residents support, 33% oppose. But the same poll shows that 52% of BC residents believe the province should have veto rights. Okay, so 56% support. Very similar, 52% believe that BC should have veto rights over any such project unless certain conditions are met, and support is weaker when it comes to so-called fast-tracking the pipeline. In other words, giving it expedited regulatory status. So, interesting numbers.
Yeah, and fair point. I think that's really important to keep in mind. Obviously, my position is pretty clear. I think what I'm trying to do is help educate people as to why perhaps we could say no to this one particular project while saying yes to a whole others. And public majority of, well, that's pretty fine line. You can see me trying to. I don't want to discount that at all, but I guess I would point out, there have been times when the majority of public opinion has been on the wrong side of history. If you look at, wasn't so long ago that the majority of Canadians would have also supported residential schools and all kinds of things like that. People also want action on climate change. People want a lot of things. People are scared right now because we're living in really uncertain times and money's tight. I'm super sympathetic to that. I don't want to discount that for a second, but I would respectfully say there is a reason that David Eby all of the BC NDP government and all of the First Nations in BC, almost all First Nations in BC, at an overwhelming majority, are really opposed to this pipeline. It is not out of some namby-pamby, hippie, precious concern for trees or whales. It is out of a very real economic, ecological concern for the dangers of this project. And I think if British Columbians understood actually the geography that I mentioned and just how dangerous it is to navigate those waters up there in that part of the coast, which is known as the graveyard of the Pacific, I think you would see those poll numbers change.
Thanks for jumping back in, Arno. Good to see you again.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. We'll get Arno again on the show next time, maybe not 3 minutes after his last interview, but we'll get him on.
Arno does it again!
Yeah,
Touchdown!
You just brought him in to be able to say that again, Johnny. So for people that aren't watching on YouTube or watching our live stream presented by California Closets, let me just put a bit of this into the podcast. By the way, Dawn chimes in and says, Ryan looks puzzled. Fuck you, Don. Puzzled? What the fuck are you talking about? Here's angusreid.org. That was not generous. That was not a gracious comment, but it's also real talk. Here's the results of this Angus Reid poll. Generally, here's the question. Do you support or oppose the idea of an oil pipeline from Alberta to the BC coast traveling through northern BC? The numbers are obviously for support highest. Strongly support in Alberta, 52% strongly support, 51% in Saskatchewan, strongly support, plus another 26% in both of those provinces strongly support. So in Alberta, 78% strongly support the idea of an oil pipeline from Alberta to the BC coast traveling through northern BC, obviously. Interesting. So there you have it. 30% in BC strongly support it, plus 26 support it for 56% support. When it comes to those who oppose in BC, a pair of 17s, 17% oppose, 17% strongly oppose. So 34% strongly oppose versus a total of 17% who strongly oppose or oppose it out of Alberta. Look at the numbers in Quebec. I mean, Quebec has nothing to do with this. This would be a specific poll question about a pipeline from Alberta to BC, but still, 21% of Quebecers strongly support it, another 29 for a total of 50% of Quebecers support the idea versus 31% who strongly oppose. And then there's about a fifth of people, well, depending on the province, a fifth of Quebecers say, I'm not sure, I can't say. Just 5% in Alberta, just 4% in Saskatchewan, and even a meager 11% or 1 in 10 in BC aren't sure. They say that they can't say yet. They're not sure how they feel about it. I want to get to more on this, but listen, as we're talking about the environment, as we're talking about the natural resources that are best portrayed to the rest of the world, that are celebrated with tourism dollars, it's Wednesday, and every single Wednesday we celebrate Jasper in Jasper National Park. It's My Jasper Memories, proudly presented by our friends at Tourism Jasper. And we're taking this one in a bit of a different direction this time around, and we want to focus on the Moline Range. This is Canadian-inspired whiskey and dining in the heart of Jasper. If you've not yet had a chance to check out the Moline Range, drop everything and get there. This is one of the newer businesses right along Jasper's main drag, and an absolutely breathtaking design. And that's not even to mention the culinary offerings. That's not even to mention what they're distilling in there. But the Moline Range was on a lot of folks' radar in a really tough kind of a way, because they were just getting set to open their doors. They were just getting set for their grand opening in the middle of July last summer, when wildfire roared into that town. And of course, it put everything on hold, obviously, for the entire national park, for the entrepreneurs, the restaurateurs out there, and the staff. And our friends at Tourism Jasper are assisting us in highlighting the personal stories that are represented there. You're going to recognize this individual you're about to see here. This is Wendy Hall. Wendy was one of the first to join us live on Real Talk the morning after that wildfire. She lost her home. She was displaced. She had evacuated with her family to Valemont, and that's where she joined us. Now, Wendy's back, settled in Jasper. She and her family have brand new accommodations, a brand new home to call their very own, and she's back at work at the Moline Range. And she shares her personal story in this edition of My Jasper Memories.
The night that we evacuated Jasper on July 22nd, 2024, it was our first night in the restaurant, in uniform for the first time, make sure our fits looked good. But I was so happy to be in this space and in my uniform and ready to embark on this amazing journey with this team and this company. I snapped a selfie of myself to send to my husband, and my face is beaming. And little did I know, within a few hours of that picture being taken, how much our lives would change. It's interesting because even over the course of those few days leading up to the fire hitting town, I was very worried about this space because it's so beautiful in here. And I think the atmosphere, it feels like you're stepping into a really modern space. The food is phenomenal. The whiskey cocktails are phenomenal, especially that old fashioned. In my 30 years living in Jasper, this has been probably my favorite experience in a restaurant as far as the ownership goes. They care very deeply about the community, which I'm very passionate about myself. I also sit on town council as well as my role here as a server. I think, the community involvement is amazing here. It's community first.
So there you have it. That's Wendy Hall at the Moline Range. By the way, congratulations to Councillor Hall and her recent re-election. We won't make this political, but we always want to recognize political involvement where it happens. She's obviously such a proud champion of the Moline Range. And I want to encourage you to check it out. I wouldn't even just say your next time out in Jasper. I would say go out to Jasper to check out the Moline Range. Moline Range brings the spirit of exploration to the table. So their menus are celebrating Western Canadian ingredients and thoughtful craft, offering dishes that balance comfort with creativity. The dining is phenomenal. As you can see here, just check out themolinerange.com. But Johnny, she did mention the old-fashioned. As an old-fashioned enthusiast, I can tell you that it is among, if not the, best old-fashioned in the Canadian Rockies. So your next time out to Jasper, check out the Moline Range.
I, as an enthusiast too, I've heard that many times. So I will put them to the Pepsi challenge if that's what they want.
The Pepsi challenge.
And you know what's funny?
Don't put Pepsi in your whiskey, everybody.
I will say this. Some of the best old fashions I've ever had are in Jasper. So
I agree.
It's stiff competition up there. But am I an expert? Because I also think, and I don't want to say the name because we're talking about other places, but I had one at a pretty mainstream chain the other night, and I was like, God damn, this is a good one too.
Jeez,
but
Johnny.
Some of the best old fashions are in Jasper, so I am gonna go to Moline Range. And I am gonna sit there and I'm gonna say, hey, I heard you guys got something up your sleeve.
But you got to be incognito. You got to be incognito so they don't know you as Johnny
mustache,
Infamous from Real Mustache.
Glasses.
No one will notice the guy with the big fake mo and the sunglasses and the hat. What I'm thinking is, because you and I have promised each other, we've made a producer's promise.
A pinky swear.
That we're going to be out in Jasper together in January.
Yeah.
And so I say we do an old-fashioned tour. And perhaps we will.
Did you just hear?
We're going to need a ride.
We'll start posting about it halfway through. The post gets sketchy, and then we're just offline.
The photos are a little... But I think what we're going to need to do, it'll maybe need to be by horse-drawn sleigh.
Okay.
And then we'll just tour through Jasper, and ultimately we will award...
We're going to be two drunk uncles.
The best old-fashioned in the Rockies.
Two drunk uncles on horseback.
No. We're in the sleigh.
I know.
We're not on those magnificent beasts. You can find more about the Moline Range, including checking out their dining menu, learn more about their unbelievable whiskey,
Food
and of
looks
course, you
incredible
can
there.
learn about. They also have a whole events page, which is really cool,
Yeah.
including an event package, a group dinner menu, which is really neat. A unique distillery and restaurant setting, ideal for any occasion. Corporate functions, cocktail receptions, seated dinners. They've got this mezzanine with a private bar that can fit 55 guests, or you can just buy out the full venue, accommodate groups up to 180. Maybe Johnny's next birthday
That's
party
perfect wedding size.
at themolinerange.com. Yeah, good call there. My Jasper Memories is proudly presented by Tourism Jasper. Wednesdays on Real Talk. And if you're like Matt and Amy, Real Talkers who have their little guy Max out in Jasper right now, and you're going to be out there, let us know. We'd love to feature your story, your Jasper Memories, right here on Real Talk on Wednesdays. Whitestream says on new pipelines, no private funding, and there's no insurance company that's willing to underwrite such a project. We'll see.
Well,
a lot of people have their own personal opinions on that. I would like to see if that actually is the case.
Well,
Interesting that Max and Arno both talked about whether or not, Mark Carney may play in the favor of Alberta on this. which is good, I think, for bridge building. But whether or not this pipeline actually gets built is far from guaranteed, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I was looking it up because as you're talking about it, and we're talking about, like you said, you just showed those numbers before we went to my Jasper. This many Canadians, approve or represent people who want new oil infrastructure, want new pipelines. But I would like to know how much education those people have on what that actually takes. And what are you talking about? Because we just mentioned 4 or 5 projects here just 10 minutes ago. If you're talking about natural gas, there's lots of financial interest for backing and investment. If you're talking about large crude oil experts, stuff like TMX, like an Alberta to East Coast pipeline, people aren't buying that because it's going to take a decade to build and be paid off. I mean, God, how long does it take? It must take 20, sometimes 30 years to pay off it in full.
Yeah.
People aren't interested in that, but are they interested in smaller lines, in connecting in phase 2 and 3 of existing lines and adding 100 million more barrels to other infrastructure that we already have? There is lots of financial interest in investment for that. So it's not Mr. Carney who's not shaking hands and trying to get that investment here as well. He already knows that it's not there is what it is,
Yeah. Feder here says, he says, obviously, this is where he says, I give the Prime Minister credit. He says, Jespo's guest, Arno, was, on the environmental side, obviously, and says Danielle, Premier Smith, is a bit too oil and gas friendly. And he says common sense probably lies in the middle. Metamodern Sound says, paying for cleanup, says you're talking about socializing the losses, right? Which is an interesting way to put it. Others of you are talking about how we're far too reliant on the Americans as our only customer to oil and gas, or at least as the biggest customer. Denis wonders, why does Alberta have one of the lowest royalty rates in the world? I mean, Ed Stelmach paid for it with his job when he mused about a royalty review, right? What was that, 2009? Off the top of my head, I might be wrong. And how about this from Rod, who says, guys, don't forget to like this episode. It makes it so other people will get this in their feed.
Hey,
Rod,
thanks, Rod.
We love you, Rod, and you're absolutely correct. A bouquet to you. It is true if you like and subscribe. I know that like all the young YouTubers say that for like, I'm going to sound like 85 years old right now, but like with their skateboard videos and smashing their parents in the face with lemon pies like Bam Margera used to do on old school VHS.
Yeah.
And they'll all say like and subscribe at the end, but it is actually true. If you do that for us, it really does help us out. So we appreciate it.
I also heard it gets you on Santa's good list.
It gets you on Santa's nice list, which is just perfect timing right now.
For the holidays.
On what we opened with today, which is obviously very serious subject matter as well, Bill 9 in Alberta invoking the notwithstanding clause for the second time in a month. Nia, thanks for your YouTube channel membership. Nia says, FYI, both former UCP MLAs Guthrie and Sinclair voted yay for Bill 9 yesterday, said they have been quiet on where the new party will stand. Nia says, I guess we know now. Christine says this is a gross abuse of the notwithstanding clause. This government is not concerned with helping kids who are struggling with issues relating to transitioning. Christine says the University of Calgary's law blog, not Bob Loblaw's blog, but the University of Calgary's law blog says we'll cover this today, so you can check that out. I appreciate Christine putting that on our radar. Yeah, this is, you've got a lot to say about this. Alberta Girl says, a government knows that they're approaching their best before date when they start to use the notwithstanding clause to enact their ideological policies, says this reeks of desperation. I don't think I agree with that, to be honest with you. I don't think that this government feels that they've hit their best before date, and I don't think that this government feels that it's desperate. I think that this government is more emboldened now than we have seen an Alberta government emboldened in a long time, and I'm including Jason Kenney in that. I think that this government, under Danielle Smith, her leadership, and the office's, what's his title, executive director of the Premier's office, Rob Anderson, former Wildrose MLA, former colleague of Danielle Smith's when they were in opposition, I think that they are absolutely moving forward, emboldened and unhindered by things like public consultation, legislative process, and the like. I don't think that this government thinks that it's in trouble at all. And I think that it'll be interesting to see if there is a, what do you want to call it? I'll be honest with you, John, I feel like the word progressive is a little bit polluted. There's a lot of words that are polluted these days. Progressive conservative used to be something people were proud of, and now if you use the word progressive, people sort of loop that in with things like socialist, other words that have just taken on entirely new meanings, not to mention fascist and Nazi and everything else. But the word progressive has come to be some sort of a supercharged idea of like a far left ideology that flies in the face of anything that could be congruous with a conservative mindset. So let me just say this, that noted, if there are small p progressive conservatives still in caucus willing to speak out, then maybe we might see evidence of that, of a leader acting out of desperation because she or he believes that they're going to pay for it with their job, that their political career may be over if they don't change course. I don't get the sense that that's where Danielle Smith is at right now, or at least not where she believes that she is at. I might be wrong, and you can let me know if you disagree. We welcome your emails. The good news is that we're just 2 days away from, no, that's incorrect. Tomorrow, our next episode will be our final episode this week. The 20th of November will be our final episode this week of other business to take care of, off air, so to speak. So we will have an early edition of the Flamethrower presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. So if you've got a hot take or something that you need to get off your chest, make sure you send us an email before 7:30 a.m. Mountain Time on the 20th of November, on Thursday, if you want it to be considered for the Flamethrower presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park.
We got a deadline.
We do have a deadline. Well, I know it's just like it kills me when we'll get a submission of the Flamethrower that's like, 5 minutes after the show. It's like, gosh, now we got to wait the whole next week.
I'm sure our inbox is going to be flooded after today. And I'll just chime in and say that, I think you know how I feel about this. I think it's a distraction. I think it does nothing. We already know gender-affirming surgery under 18. You can't have it in Alberta. You can't have it in Canada. There are no incidences of trans youth in sports being awarded above, cisgender males or females. I couldn't find one story, one instance, one verified case where parents were upset that somebody was medaled, awarded, or was on a podium ahead of a kid in Canada, in Alberta, especially because we're talking about Alberta. And I can't find an incident of a trans person going into a bathroom that had a, non-male or female stick figure on it, that was a multi-use bathroom, and somebody being abused or a crime taking place. And in my mind, I don't think a sign would prevent that in the first place. Having, I don't think a person who wants to abuse a child or perform a crime on a female would see, a female gender sign on a bathroom and think, oh, I was going to do that, but I can't because the wrong signs on the bathroom. It's, so I just think all of this is not what our government was elected to do.
Yeah.
Even the people who elected her must agree with that. This wasn't on the docket.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's interesting, and public opinion can be unpredictable on these sort of things. Like Erica's comment, and I didn't see Erica, and I want to just thank everybody that was in our live chat today, powered by Park Power. Get exclusive discounts, by the way, on internet, electricity, natural gas. Visit parkpower.ca/realtalk. You just did. You just got some discounts the other day.
I'm on Park Power internet now, bro.
Pretty awesome. Just out.
It's
is it
fast,
is it
and it's about $40 cheaper than I was paying for
amazing.
internet.
Okay, so but Erica said, and maybe Erica followed up on the comment. I didn't see it. I apologize. It was moving fast today. But Erica said, and I put it on the record, where she said, what did she say? She did agree with two of the things, two of the elements of Bill 9, and didn't agree with one. And maybe Erica clarified which one. But I think that there is nuance to this. I said that in my opening remarks. And some people will support this. Some people will plug their noses and support it. Some people will absolutely fight. I mean, like Anna Murphy today talking to us. Powerful first-person testimony about what life was like for Anna growing up and Anna's experience as a trans woman living in Alberta. So you're going to tell Anna she's wrong, right? Everyone's going to have different perspectives on this, but we respect nuance on this show, and we always say, credible, responsible, empathetic, curious debate. And that's what we want, and that's what we invite you to do by sending us an email or leaving a comment on our YouTube episode. You can also hit us up on our social channels as well. John, we talk about being held accountable, and Mike wrote in yesterday, as we show you, motherdoughbreadco.com, and Mike called me to the carpet yesterday, John. He said, Jespersen, for the love of God, it's pronounced Focaccia.
I did notice that. I didn't
Focaccia.
wanna say- Dude, I
What did I say? Focaccia? Focaccia?
I remember when you said it, I was going to come in and say focaccia. Like
Well,
I was
no,
going to
but not focaccia, he says.
Yeah, okay, but still.
What did I say? Shia? Focaccia?
I messed up a pronunciation of a pipeline today, so I have nothing to say. But I did giggle when you said that, Ryan.
Yeah, well, so did Mike. And then Mike wrote in and said, sorry, buddy, I had to. And I wrote Mike back, and I said, Mike, we welcome accountability measures, including emails to talk@ryanjespersen.com on how I pronounce the incredible bread that is being baked right now at the Mother Dough Bread Co. This is brand new. This business has been open for like a week and a half, and our friends at Friesen Brothers are absolutely nailing it. You can check it out in West Edmonton. Check out motherdoughbreadco.com if you want to learn more, or just go ahead and visit them. They're open early in the morning for their incredible. Can we show the video of what they dropped off here? Do we have that video handy? Look at this. These are Friesen Brothers sourdough cinnamon buns, and look at these sandwiches that they dropped off. Look at this. It's unbelievable. They'll make your sandwich on, this one's for you, Mike, focaccia. They can also make your sandwiches on their award-winning Friesen Brothers sourdough bread. Plus, they've got baguettes and other fresh-baked loaves that you can take home if you like it. The Friesen Brothers sourdough is nothing short of legendary, and you can pick it up today at their brand-new Mother Dough Bread Company. Find them online at motherdoughbreadco.com. If you're worried right now that your business, while successful, may not be on the right track when it comes to your long-term retirement security, if you're an established professional or a business owner that's maybe asking yourself big financial questions like how you should pay yourself, right? Like, dividends or salary, or should you put savings into your RSP or a TFSA or somewhere else? The team at North Road Investment Council is answering these questions for clients every single day. If you're a real talker over the age of 40 whose business is earning more than $200,000 annually, you should be taking a serious look at the individual pension plan or an IPP. It's a powerful retirement strategy, but it's not for everybody. And so the team at North Road has put together a clear, plain language white paper outlining the benefits and the challenges of an IPP. You can request that by visiting their website. That's northroadic.com, and find out how they can help you today. If your retirement strategy is winning the lottery, you should maybe rethink that. But if you're feeling lucky today and you're going to be going online to playalberta.ca or using the Play Alberta app, I want to let you know, with casino winners every hour, jackpots worth millions, and revenue that stays in the province of Alberta, there's never been a better time to sign up. Right now, Real Talkers can score a $50 casino bonus when you make a minimum $50 deposit with the code RYAN50. That's RYAN50 at playalberta.ca or on the Play Alberta app. Ryan50 for a $50 casino bonus when you make a minimum $50 deposit. Don't forget, every Thursday on Real Talk, stories of Albertans winning big on the national or international stage. It's a barbecue theme tomorrow, by the way. For Alberta Wins, presented by Play Alberta. You must be 18 or older to play. And if you do gamble, please do use your game sense. And something special happened. This was yesterday, Johnny, in our email inbox right after our Echoes of the Alex story. We're getting a ton of your stories on how your family has been directly impacted, and in many cases, loved ones whose lives have been saved by the doctors, nurses, and other talented staff at the Royal Alexandra Hospital. Keep those emails coming. Your Echo of the Alex to talk@ryanjespersen.com. We're so proud to be partnering with the Royal Alexandra Hospital Foundation as we encourage you to give for the future in honor of the past, as they celebrate 125 years of the Royal Alexandra Hospital. Please give generously today and be part of the Royal Alex's legacy of care. You can learn more today by visiting givetoroyalalex.org. Shout out to Ms. KD, $5 into our super chat. We sure appreciate that.
Arno!
A beer for Arno
Does
when
it
he
again.
comes in studio. The generosity of our Real Talkers. Maybe we fly Arno out. Maybe he could do an interview in studio. Supriya Dwivedi is going to be in studio with us next Monday, which
Dude,
we're really looking forward to.
We have some. We're taking Friday off, but we're going to give you
Well,
back.
I'm not taking it off. I'm working, but we won't be here.
You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
you
But
got it.
we're gonna give back, because next week, special guests,
Yeah.
big shows.
Big shows.
It's gonna come back tenfold.
Yep. exactly. Ken K says, even if you agree with the contents of Bill 9, I like this point Ken's making, use of the notwithstanding clause to ram it through should not be something that you support. And then Ken quotes that age-old wisdom, which is always a bit of a gut punch as well, as it references some of the lowest and most horrific and heinous times in human history. But first, they came for the socialists. And Ken's not wrong in invoking that. Alicia says, my biggest concern with leadership reviews, Danielle Smith's got the UCP AGM coming up in a week or so on the 28th. Pierre Poilievre has his leadership review in January. Alicia says, even if Danielle Smith and Pierre Poilievre are turfed, who comes behind them? First of all, Danielle Smith will not be turfed. I would bet my house on it. Pierre Poilievre, we'll see. I doubt it as well, as a matter of fact. But we'll see. Poilievre's got his work cut out for him within that conservative base. We're always open to your feedback, of course, and want to let you know as we start preparing for the next episode of the show. That'll be the 20th of November. We'll be looking to you for feedback. What are the stories that matter most to you? What's resonating? What do you think of what you heard on the show this week? Arno Kopecky, our panel out of the gates today. Powerful stuff from Dr. Glynnis, Lieb, and Anna Murphy. Max Fawcett yesterday. Supriya Dwivedi the day before. Feedback from you means the world to us, as does you subscribing to our YouTube channel and telling your friends about our podcast. Be well, Real Talkers. We'll see you soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton, member emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.